are these people?
To be very transparent, I don't know a lot about this story, but I pulled it because it was very interesting. But mostly because we've known of the idea of, Israel wants to give Gazians the boot, and just thinking about where they're going to go and all that.
Egypt,
India, So we've talked about the idea of Gaza being in Africa before, but this again kind of went under the radar. But there's been talks of Palestinians being sent to Somaliland. Now, a lot of you are like, wow, is Somaliland? You might have heard of Somalia. Sure, I'm sure a lot of you would have, but you may never heard of Somaliland.
Okay.
So I think before I go into the article that was written by Kit Klarenberg, wanted to give a little bit of context about Somaliland and its significance. And just looking at it on the map right there, you can probably already tell. But so let's learn a little bit about the geopolitics of Somaliland, and then we'll dive into this a little bit more.
Situated in the northeastern portion of the Horn of Africa is the breakaway territory of Somaliland. Somaliland broke away from Somalia in 1991 after a decade-long war of independence, which was considered to be a main theatre of the largest Somali rebellion against the government of then-President Siad Barre, which began in 1978. The de facto state, unrecognised by any other country in the world, controls an area largely similar to that of its British colonial predecessor, British Somaliland, barring two areas to its south and east, which are under the control of the officially recognised Somali government, but also claimed by Somaliland as part of its territory. Somaliland is considered stable by local standards, having its own constitution, currency, elections, military and police. Were Somaliland recognised as a state, it is estimated it would be the fourth poorest country in the world as of 2012. Given its position overlooking the Gulf of Aden and the nearby Bab el-Mandeb Strait, through which roughly 10% of the world's seaborne oil flows each year, Somaliland's geostrategic position is important, and this has drawn the interest of many states. Though Somaliland is not recognised by any other country, it does have relations with many states, such as Kenya, Pakistan, Turkey, the US, UK and Germany. Somaliland also has strong ties with neighbouring Ethiopia, which date back to the beginning of the battle for its independence. Given its reliance on the port of Djibouti in neighbouring Djibouti for its trade, Ethiopia, in partnership with the UAE's DP World and Somaliland, are developing the Berbera Corridor, a trade and logistics corridor that runs from Ethiopia to the port of Berbera in Somaliland. Another interesting recent addition to Somaliland's foreign relations has been the United Arab Emirates, whose DP World Port Company is involved in the aforementioned Berbera Corridor project, and the development of the new Berbera port, which it aims to turn into a new regional logistics hub. Of even more interest was the UAE's 2017 deal with the Somaliland government to establish a military base near Berbera, but this deal was later cancelled. Moving forward into the 21st century, Somaliland's status as a relatively stable yet unrecognised de facto state looks set to continue, though with increasing foreign investment its economic situation will most likely improve. That said, due to its geostrategic position and the shifting geopolitical dynamic in the Horn and wider region, outside interest in Somaliland will likely grow too.
Right, so you can probably guess, they told you, but one, there's oil. Two, that strait there is extremely important, because heading up that, eventually you head up, it's kind of parallel to the Nile. So obviously, given the resources in the area, especially with Egypt being further north, that
not that
constitutes a lot of trade.
Israel's been able to push goods down it, because I think the Houthis have been keeping control of that.
But it's a strategic position in regards to Yemen and mostly Iran. So that's why the West is looking at Somaliland with, insert that meme with that guy behind the tree just licking his lips and rubbing his hands. So just to kind of give you guys a little bit of the geopolitical significance of Somaliland. Now, before we get into the article, let's go into the current issue as far as essentially disposing Palestinians to Somaliland. So we're going to go to TRT World for that report.
Okay.
So Reef, if you
Working on it.
If you would be so kind.
Yes, sir. Let's go here. This.
For almost 18 months after October 7th, 2023, life for Palestinians living in Gaza had been a nightmare. The Hamas attack triggered a devastating retaliation from Israel, ultimately leading to deaths of tens of thousands of people and a massive displacement and humanitarian crisis. Much of the Strip was left destroyed. The fighting finally ended January. The sides agreed to a ceasefire. Since then,
no,
proposals
actually,
for
I
Gaza's
said
future
TRT.
have
It's
been
not
pitched,
TRT. It's
but one major problem
Africa
is the
Live.
current needs of Gaza's
Yeah,
residents.
it's African Live.
Should they
Right
remain
from
in the enclave
Wakanda.
during
Dope.
reconstruction or be settled somewhere else temporarily or permanently? U.S. President Donald Trump wants to see the U.S. take over Gaza entirely and for its residents to be settled
Boo those
elsewhere.
men. Boo.
Along with Israel, they approached 3 African governments, Sudan and Somalia, as well as a breakaway region of Somalia known as Somaliland. It's a proposal which hasn't gone down well in Mogadishu.
Okay, in my opinion, as an independent politician, Somali politician, I don't think that will get the unanimous support of the Somali people, be it people, the population or the government.
The US and Israel are very wrong in their decision. The same people that they killed and displaced, they now want to force them to move to another country and bring them here to Somalia. That is unacceptable because we are already suffering from civil conflict and unrest.
Under Trump's plan, Gaza's more than 2 million people will be permanently sent elsewhere. Palestinians in Gaza have rejected the proposal and dismissed Israeli claims that the departures will be voluntary. They believe it's a strategy to cleanse the area of Palestinians.
Yes.
I find Trump's proposal to resettle the people of Gaza unfeasible. Even children should not entertain such a plan. This reflects Trump's simplistic thinking, and I doubt the Palestinians will accept it, as Palestine is their homeland. There is no place better than your own country.
The idea of a mass transfer of Palestinians was once considered a fantasy of Israel's ultra-nationalist fringe. Arab nations have opposed the proposal and offered an alternative reconstruction plan that would leave the Palestinians in place. Rights groups have said forcing or pressuring the Palestinians to leave could be a potential war crime. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Potential war crime to displace thousands against their will. No, I think that's on the list. I'm pretty sure that's right up there. That's like Geneva Code Section 2, Article 4. That's like the first ones, bro. Anyway,
so now you got a little bit of the geopolitics, and now you or the history, and now you got a little more of the current politics regarding displacing Palestinians there. Now we're going to get into the art. So shout out to Klarenberg, who wrote this on his Substack / and ScheerPost picked it up.
Yep.
Where he writes, Somaliland, British colony, Palestinian concentration camp. Where he writes, in recent months, Somaliland has become a subject of intense, unprecedented interest for the Western media. Funny, I haven't heard any of this at all, but we'll continue. As Israeli and U.S. officials scramble to find a destination to forcibly relocate Gaza's population from their shattered homeland, the little-acknowledged, unrecognizable breakaway statelet is increasingly viewed as an attractive option. Multiple mainstream media reports indicates officials in Tel Aviv and Washington are making discreet overtures to Harissa on the topic. On March 14th, Financial Times revealed a U.S. official briefed on Washington's initial contacts with Somaliland's presidency said discussions had begun about a possible deal to recognize the de facto state in return for the establishment of a military base near the port of Berea on the Red Sea coast. I guess. Somaliland's president Abdulrahman Mohammed.
Wait, hold on. U.S. official briefed on Washington's Somalian presidency said this could be a possible deal to recognize for the. Oh, they want a military base there. Of course they fucking do. You fucking bastards. Like, yeah, we need something so that we can get our ships and we need a naval port and a military base right there at this really crucial port. Okay. You fucking dickheads. All right. Cool. Good to know.
Somaliland's president Abdirahman Mohammed Abdullahi has made international recognition a major priority, and the prospect of a permanent U.S. military presence insulating the breakaway territory from violent instability that regularly engulfs Somalia is also no doubt enormously attractive. From Washington's perspective, too, such an arrangement offers profuse geopolitical gains well beyond the involuntary relocation of millions of Palestinians to make way for Trump's fantasized Gaza Lago. For one, Somaliland's proximity to the Arabian Peninsula makes the territory an ideal staging ground for strikes on Yemen.
Thank you.
Which is exactly like you said. This would represent a vital new strategic foothold for the empire in Africa at a time French and U.S. occupation forces are being evicted from countries across the continent with ever-increasing rapidity. Moreover, it could serve as a counterweight to consistently growing Chinese and Russian influence locally. In 2017, Beijing established its first overseas military base in Somaliland's neighboring Djibouti. Ever since, the country has been a pugnacious critic of Western policy in the region and allowed Iranian ships to dock at its ports. The geopolitical and military utility of Somaliland's recognition as a state has long been understood in Washington. Project 2025, a lengthy mandate for leadership drawn up by the right-wing Heritage Foundation think tank, widely perceived as a blueprint for Donald Trump's second term in office, contained a dedicated section of countering malign Chinese activity in Africa. It specifically recommended the recognition of Somaliland statehood as a hedge against the U.S. deteriorating position in Djibouti. Trump's readiness to recognize Somaliland was furthermore advertised in November 2024, long before the would-be country became a political candidate for the resettlement of Palestinians. Former British Defense Secretary Gavin Williamson revealed he had been engaged in really good meetings with the president's policy leads on the issue and expressed confidence the White House would act accordingly. Williamson has long been an ardent advocate of Somaliland's independence, regularly undertaking all expense-paid trips to the breakaway territory and receiving honorary citizenship for his lobbying efforts. Jesus Christ.
A little pay to play. Never hurts anybody. You know?
Williamson's pronounced interest in Somaliland is a uniquely rare public manifestation of a little-known truth. While formally granted independence by London in 1960 and having claimed to be a sovereign autonomous region of Somalia since 1991, Somaliland is a modern-day British colony. Where Palestinians uprooted there against their will, they would be entombed in yet another open-air concentration camp under the watchful eye of British-trained local security forces with a propensity of extreme violence.
Which we covered.
Right. In April 2019, prolific British government contractor Axis Strategy declared bankruptcy, leaving scores of staff unpaid and overseas suppliers owed vast sums. The company's abrupt disintegration came despite reaping tens of millions of pounds from the Foreign Office of Development projects throughout Africa and West Asia. While largely ignored by the Western media, the Somaliland Chronicle published a detailed investigation into the scandal, but Axis was at the time of its collapse engaged in a justice and security sector reform project in the statelet. Local official records indicate London earmarked over £18 million for this effort alone in Somaliland, 2017 through 2022. It is just one of many British bankrolled projects in the breakaway territory, which results in Somaliland's entire state structure, including its government, military, judiciary, prisons, police, security, and intelligence apparatus, being managed, trained, and directed by London. Such pervasive hidden influence in these sensitive areas is amply exposed by the contents of numerous leaked British intelligence files. For example, one document discusses how notorious British intelligence cutout Adam Smith International provides ongoing training and mentoring to build the capacity of Somaliland's National Intelligence Agency and Rapid Response Unit while overseeing the territory's forensic service, a personal identification and recording system that captures data at border posts, and prosecution procedures managed by the Attorney General's office. Somaliland's dedicated counterterrorism unit was moreover created in 2012 with Foreign Office funding under ASI management. Elsewhere, ASI boasts of its proven history of establishing close professional relationships with senior government, armed forces, police, security sector, and Ministry of Defense officials in Somaliland. One file notes the contractor deployed specialist ex-UK military advisors to run a program to improve the capacity of military intelligence units in the Army and Coast Guard. ASI also assisted with the development of Somaliland's Officer Cadet course, mentoring senior officers in leadership, management, and military doctrine. The contractor has even drafted laws subsequently adopted by the government. Meanwhile, Albany, another British contractor, was charged with tutoring Somaliland's authorities in the art of propaganda and information warfare.
Nice.
This entailed structured training and mentoring of key government ministers and other senior figures in working with the media, helping them produce a steady flow of information detailing the government's work and engage proactively with journalists. It was noted unsatisfied public demand for information from the government on nationally significant events gave independent information sources significant influence locally, which was to be countered by all costs.
Okay.
Public distrust of the government was moreover exacerbated by the regular arrests of journalists and the closure of independent media outlets in Somaliland. By providing extensive media training to key government ministries and state organs and appointed spokesmen and media officers, Albany would help authorities to use the media to better communicate their reform agenda with one voice, thus dominating the breakaway territory's information space and silencing dissenting local elements. What does this sound like to you, Reef?
America? Just about?
Yeah.
But also, I mean, this is just narrative control and, getting rid of independent journalism because quote, what was it? Must be countered at all costs. Unsatisfied public demand for information from the government or nationally significant events. So people know that their fucking media is lying to them, and they're like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Bad. Bad idea. Ugh. Okay.
But anyway, for all ASI's boasts of professionalizing and reforming Somaliland's armed forces and police, other leaked files related to the activities on contractor Kofi paint a very different picture. For instance, one document notes the stateless military. It's the largest and most costly institution of state, but its chiefs resist oversight by the Ministry of Defense, and it is likely Army funds are being used for purposes other than national defense and security. Moreover, capacity for holding the military accountable for abuses is, quote-unquote, limited. Elsewhere, Kofi noted that Somaliland police have a history of applying disproportionate force to contain disorder. Again, sounds familiar. And the territory lacks a dedicated public order unit. The contractor suggested creating such an entity in the ranks of the Special Protection Unit, a paramilitary force created to protect foreign organizations operating in the aspiring country and individuals they employ. At the time of writing, it had no remit to professionally or proportionately respond to planned and spontaneous events, peaceful protests, and outbreaks of serious public disorder. The document was offered in July 2015. It called for Somaliland law enforcement to be trained and assessed by UK National Police in Britain. There, they would learn first aid, how to engage effectively with crowds of protesters, and gain understanding of human rights according to international law.
Which is bullshit.
Tutoring officers in constructive, peaceful methods of dealing with public disturbances would, Kofi pledged, ensure proportionality, lawfulness, and accountability throughout Somaliland's police forces. If such training was conducted, it evidently had no tangible impact whatsoever. In late 2022, mass protests broke out in the contested Somalian city of Las Anod. Somaliland security forces crushed the upheaval using lethal force, leaving dozens dead. Unrest only intensified thereafter, leading to Somaliland's military savagely shelling the city the next year. In April 2023, Amnesty International report branded the assault indiscriminate in the extreme, with civilian infrastructure including hospitals, schools, and mosques struck, hundreds killed and injured, and hundreds of thousands displaced.
And where have we seen
Given
that
its
before?
context, right. And this is where the West wants to send Palestinians.
Send them from one pot into the fire, essentially.
Right.
Okay. Great.
Given this context, Somaliland's appeal to Israel and its Western puppet masters as a dumping ground for Gazians is obvious. A well-armed, repressive domestic security apparatus stands ever ready to brutally quell any and all local resistance. Meanwhile, if the U.S. used the territory to strike Yemen, displaced Palestinians could be exploited as hostages and human shields to deter Ansar Allah counterattacks. We can only hope this disposable scheme crumbles as quickly as prior plans to shunt Gazians into Egypt and Jordan. So, great job, Kit. But yeah, I mean, it's, as you said, from going from one pot to another pot, and it just sounds like to me, it's more or less double trouble in terms of what Somalians in Somaliland are going through already, coupled with the idea of Palestinians being entered there. So it's just, and just a mess, potentially all around. So, but yeah, that's why I wanted to play the news clip prior to that, just to kind of show that Somalians there are not having it.
Nope. We know what's up.
Right. So, so obviously this is meant to kind of build dissent, to cause more unrest within the the statelet, I guess you could say it is. But yeah, just the idea of we'll recognize you as a state if you take Palestinians, and we can build a military there to, and again, I would argue they talk about Yemen, but Iran as well, that they can kind of watch over, but then kind of overtake the resources that are in the area there as well as a little gift for themselves too. Again, they mentioned there's oil in that region too. Yep. So obviously where there's oil, there's going to be interest to both the US and Israel. So
and that and just the geographic location,
right.
being able to be a strategic encampment. So funny to bring up the human shields thing too. That's par for the course for Western powers, and then they'll blame, their enemies for doing the same when they don't do that. So, but, but good looking out though, for sure. We'll keep an eye on that region.
So, I mean, Africa in general, but yeah, but it's just adding more.
Yeah.
Just Israel has their hand.
Forced migration,
Right. But Israel has their hand everywhere. We've already talked about how Israel basically kind of exploits Africa. Not exploit, but they give them things. As far as infrastructure in terms of things that they need to buy favor with these countries so that, politicians and leaders there would be more sympathetic to them. And we've seen that and we've talked about that. But just the whole Greater Israel Project, I would also argue, because we talk about the Great Israel Project in terms of, the Middle East and East in the Arabian Peninsula, I would also argue that a lot of that would kind of affect Africa as well, particularly south and southwest of Egypt, especially along the Nile region there. So given what we talked about as far as the Ben Gurion project, like, given that, especially within that strait next to Somaliland, again, that's parallel to the Nile. It's also traditionally, perfect for the Arabian Peninsula. But then, obviously, as we said before, like Israel basically will have control, or the idea that they have full control and full resources over that entire region. And the West basically benefits from that, as given that Israel is their proxy. So yeah, but it's just the idea of sending Palestinians there to a region of of Africa that is under civil unrest already, thanks UK, and then bringing another people group in to add to more of that confusion. I think it's essentially, I feel like it's a British way of, or like the West way of saying, okay, since we can't kill you in Gaza, we're going to send you over to Somaliland where we can kill you, thanks to the British. And you can go to war with the Somalians there.
Literally move the goalposts. Literally.
Right.
Move them to a different continent. And, if it's in Africa, people just stop paying attention. So, that's how it works.
The idea that the thing is that Kit, now granted, Kit is based in the UK, so there might have been coverage over there.
Yeah.
Definitely did not hear any coverage about that over here.
No.
So I do want to give Kit, the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, in UK media, they're slightly better. That they might, but but definitely not here in the States. So yeah, but like I said, I thought it was very interesting, given that just Africa again essentially being the dumping ground, for the rest. But people shit on Africa, but yet they want to do everything within Africa in order to exploit them for their own benefit. Just another story that kind of speaks into that imperialism and exploitation of Africa. So there you go.
A lot of stuff happens that the news won't tell you.
Yeah. What? Huh? What? News not telling you things? Who would have thunk? Anything else?
No, that's all I got.
Okay. Well,
that's why we're demonetized, because we talk about stuff like this that no one else does. So if you want to continue hearing more stories about this, you should scan that QR code that you see on your screen if you have a smartphone and watching on your computer. Or you can go to the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen there. Or if you're in YouTube, you can type in !donate and the Ko-fi link will come up. And if you give there, you'll see your donation and your message on screen. So that would be our small benefit of what we're able to do for you if you do that. You can also give to our CashApp, PayPal, and Substack accounts. Those links are in the description if you want to give to us there. But as we keep saying, we understand how, and we do appreciate your generous donations to help us support the channel. But obviously, we know that people are not doing so hot financially, and we want, as we keep saying, we want you guys to take care of yourselves first. So that being said, if you want to support us the free way, don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share to fight suppression, because we experience that a lot, and we're shadow banned on YouTube. And make sure you leave a comment. So first of all, have you ever heard of Somaliland before? Let's start there. But then what do you think about the potential of Gazians being displaced to Somaliland, and especially given its geopolitical significance? What do you think about this whole thing, essentially how the British are basically using it as, their military stomping ground, and the idea of having Somalians there with Palestinians to kind of add more chaos? So let us know in the comments, or if you're watching the segment, of what you think. And help us get to 3K. We're actually very close to 2,500. We're about I think we're about 99 people away from 2,500. So please hit both benchmarks so that so more people can see our content. And thanks for watching.